Bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor! Invitatul ediției de astăzi a emisiunii noastre este domnul Brian Brown, președinte al Organizației Internaționale pentru Familie. Vă salut, domnule Brown, și vă mulțumim tare frumos că ați acceptat să ne acordați acest interviu. Precizez pentru telespectatori, noi suntem online, de la distanță. De asta vă rog, domnule Brown, să ne spuneți pentru început unde vă aflați.
So I just landed a few minutes ago here in Warsaw, Poland, for the inauguration of the new president, Nawrocki. I'm coming from, I've been in Europe ever since the Moldova event, and now I've landed here in Warsaw.
Și autoritățile din Varșovia v-au permis accesul pe teritoriul Poloniei?
Well, I've never had any problem entering any European country. I've met with a number of heads of state, including Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister Viktor Orban. I've never had any problem entering a European country. The only problem I ever had was the issue that occurred in Moldova.
Amintim telespectatorilor noștri că domnul Brown, acum o săptămână, a avut acces interzis pe teritoriul Moldovei, domnia sa dorind să participe la un eveniment, o masă rotundă numită Make Europa Great Again. Ulterior, doamnelor și domnilor, peste vreo 12 ore, totuși autoritățile noastre i-au permis domniei sale să intre pe teritoriul Moldovei. De asta, domnule Brown, povestiți-ne, vă rog, cum a fost istoria. Ați aterizat pe teritoriul Republicii Moldova and what?
Well, what happened was that I had been on an overnight flight from New York, as I often do, coming into Europe. And when I had landed in Chisinau, as I was going through the passport control, I was stopped. And I was taken to a secondary inspection room. And I noticed that there were people there that I knew. Richard Czarnecki, a member of the European Parliament from Poland and politician, was there. There were some other members there that I knew were going to attend the Make Europe Great Again conference. And they were also being held in this room, waiting. Both of them were eventually allowed in. Richard Reisgard had his diplomatic passport held, which is quite abnormal, and then they gave it back and they allowed him in the country. With me, they held me longer and then came to me and handed me a piece of paper they asked me to sign that said I had been rejected entry because of the possibility of causing public disorder in Moldova. I was stunned. I'd been in Moldova many times. I did a World Congress of Families event in Moldova. I couldn't believe that they were doing this. I told them, are you sure? And they said yes. And so that started a roughly 10-hour escapade where I was held in the airport. I was told that the authorities would buy me a ticket back to Warsaw. They did not do that. I bought a ticket to leave at 5 a.m. after staying overnight in a brightly lit open area of the airport. And when I told them I had a ticket, they never came to take me to get on the plane. So I lost that ticket. Then I purchased another ticket for 9:20 a.m., but I had contacted the U.S. Embassy. Again, this is very abnormal. I've been a pretty well-known conservative speaker and leader of the International Organization for the Family. I've done events all over the world. I've never had this happen, so I contacted the U.S. Embassy. And as I was on the bus to get on the next plane, I received a call from the embassy. I spoke to the embassy. I was still put on the plane, and then as the plane was about to take off, a truck, a government border patrol truck came out, and I was actually thinking oh no, what's going to happen next? They got off the truck, they boarded the plane, they stopped the plane, they asked for my name. I got off the plane. I had no idea what was happening next. And they took me into the border control room, and then they asked me for that paper that I had signed that said I was being denied entry under Section J of the right of the Republic of Moldova to deny entry to those that could cause public disorder. I handed it to the Border Patrol. He kept it. I thought he would hand it back. And then he said, the authorities have made a mistake. You are welcome to the Republic of Moldova. And I was allowed in.
Domnul Brown, dumneavoastră considerați că aceasta a fost strict contra dumneavoastră o acțiune sau e vorba totuși de această mișcare conservatoare care ia amploare în ultima vreme, odată cu schimbarea administrației de la Casa Albă, mișcări care vin peste Europa, repet, sau e strict contra a persoanei domniei voastre?
Well, I found out later that members of the European Parliament had been denied entry. Again, I do conferences all over the world. I'd never seen that before. And the spokesman for a Greek political party had been denied entry. So it was clearly about this Make Europe Great Again conference. And clearly there was an attempt to shut it down. And it makes no sense to me because, you know, Moldova is in talks to, in the early stages of attempting to join the European Union. Why would you deny two members of the European Parliament? Why would you deny someone that has been a strong supporter and has, you know, many friends in the Trump administration and has done events in Moldova before? It makes no sense other than just trying to silence dissent. And that is not democratic. That is totally against the basic principles of freedom of speech, totally against basic principles of freedom of movement. I'm clearly no threat to public order. I'm standing up for ideas I believe in. People can disagree with them, but we can debate. That's what we do in a civilized, free society. When we disagree, we debate. The idea that Moldova would say that members of the European Parliament, leaders of the conservative movement are no longer welcome in their country and then hold them overnight. This is not something that a democratic free society does. So I know that others were sent home. I know others had a difficult time staying there a long time. So I know that, you know, it's clear that it was targeting this event. And no matter what excuse the Moldovan authorities attempt to make, it was a disaster for freedom of speech, for freedom of association. And, you know, I hope nothing like that happens again.
Autoritățile noastre spun pe de altă parte că prin interzicerea accesului acestor mai multe persoane se urmărește de fapt securitatea națională a Republicii Moldova. De ce eu și alții să nu fim de acord cu aceste argumente ale autorităților noastre?
Anyone can go online and see the events that we have done at the World Congress of Families. These are mainstream events. We had multiple members of various governments at our last event in Mexico with over 10,000 people attending. We've done the World Congress of Families in Verona with Giorgia Meloni and Salveo. We've had events with prime ministers, Viktor Orban in Budapest. So the notion that this is some sort of extremist group is just absolutely false. And this is dangerous. It is dangerous when you start to say that because people have a different opinion than you do, for example, on the current direction of the European Union, that somehow you're going to treat them as the Soviets treated those that dissented. That is wrong. It's not acceptable. And there will be repercussions from other countries. They're not going to accept that that our citizens are not treated with the same sort of respect that Moldovan citizens should be treated, especially those that are in government. And again, when it's clear that for whatever reason, there's an attempt to silence people. You don't get to just scream whenever someone doesn't like your position on the European Union, or whenever someone doesn't like the fact that you support Donald Trump and that you're a part of the Make America Great Again and you believe in making Europe great again. Even if you disagree with that, you don't simply get to have this authorities say, oh, you're pro-Russian, you're pro-Russian. And that's basically what's happening now, is that a lot of our arguments have won: the importance of family life, the fact that Europe is facing a demographic disaster. Even Elon Musk has talked about this. And so many of our arguments are winning. And now what some people, and unfortunately some people in power, are relegated to is simply attempting to silence us. And that's, again, that's wrong. And we're not going to be silenced. We're going to keep speaking. We're going to keep creating relationships from country to country. And, we have absolutely zero shame, and in fact are quite proud of what we're doing to advance life and family around the world.
Domnul Brown, dumneavoastră sunteți cunoscut ca un apropiat al lui Donald Trump și chiar prieten cu Marco Rubio. Nu credeți că anume asta a influențat decizia de interdicție pentru dumneavoastră ca să intrați în Moldova?
I don't think so. I hope not, because that would be a tremendous mistake on the part of the authorities. Again, I don't know. All I know is I don't know what was in the head of the authorities. All I know is what happened, and that was that many of the speakers that were going to attend the Make Europe Great Again conference in Chisinau were denied entry. I know that, and I know that many of them were political leaders, including members of the European Parliament. I don't know the reasons why. I know that clearly it's easy to understand that if members of a particular conference were all targeted, then the problem is that conference. As far as my support for President Trump and any connections I have and friends that I have in the administration, I actually think that the authorities would want to have good relationships with those that are in the American government. It doesn't make any sense to me. We should, even people we disagree with, I try and meet with everyone, even people I have disagreements with, we should be able to meet with, and it doesn't mean that we agree on everything. So again, I would hope that under basic principles of freedom of association and freedom of speech, that just because some authorities disagreed with my political positions doesn't mean that they somehow then get to blackball me or treat me as if I don't have the right to speak.
Mr. Brown, sincerely, you called just Embassy United States in Moldova, or you call in Washington?
Well, I did call some people I knew in Washington, D.C., but my main call was to the U.S. Embassy in Moldova.
Ok. Se știe că dumneavoastră aveți cunoștință într-o parte, în alta. Asta v-a ajutat poate să accedeți pe teritoriul Moldovei. Dar ce sfat le-ați da celor care s-ar putea confrunta ulterior cu astfel de probleme când ar veni în țara noastră și la graniță li s-ar spune că au interzis de a intra pe teritoriul țării noastre?
Well, I don't think we should accept, again, we want to follow all the laws of various countries that we enter. We're respectful of the laws of the countries that we enter when we go from place to place. But at the same time, when an injustice occurs and you see that many people are being detained and that members of the European Parliament are having their diplomatic passports taken, and you see that this is clearly not something that is at all normal in international relations, for me, it was important to make it public. So I went on X and recorded what was going on. I made 2 or 3 recordings, and I do know that thousands of people saw that, tens of thousands, and that, I do think being public about what's going on is important. Again, if the government says that this is a mistake, it would be good to know why, because it wasn't just me, and others were denied entry and essentially kicked out of the country. And then I know that the security service gave a letter or a statement saying that we were destabilizing Moldova. That's really out there, and it's absolutely untrue. We were having a conference. This is a conference that obviously should be allowed to happen, that is about making Europe great again. Obviously, people have different points of view, but you don't just shut down a conference you don't like and use the excuse of public disorder or instability. That's wrong.
Domnul Braun, organizatorii Mega de la Chișinău spun că ceea ce s-a întâmplat este un pas spre, nu știu, cenzură totală. Noi, pe de altă parte mergem încetișor spre Uniunea Europeană. Dacă e așa și dacă tot mergem încolo, de ce am recurge noi sau de ce recurg ai noștri la asemenea gesturi dure?
Well, we all know that there's an election coming up, and I think that may have played a role in all of this. And, we've seen increasingly attempts to silence and erase, in fact, political parties that authorities don't agree with. We saw what happened in Romania. We saw what happened and is currently happening with AfD in Germany. We've seen attempts to keep people off of the ballot. This is not, unfortunately, this is not something that's new. This is what J.D. Vance was pointing to in his Munich Security Conference speech, that increasingly European leaders are saying one thing but doing another. They're talking about freedom, but they're greatly restricting the freedom of speech and association, and especially for conservatives. That's just a reality right now. And if there's any attempt to tar people with claims that they're pro-Russian, or if they're claims that they're authoritarian or totalitarian, anything that can be used, obviously untrue, they'll throw it at you to try and silence you. And again, this is not Moldova is a part of what has happened, is one example of a number of examples that we've seen in countries, and people should be worried about it, and they should be pushing back against it. I was raised in Southern California in the 80s. I was a big supporter of Ronald Reagan, very much against the lack of freedom in the Soviet Union, very thankful for its fall. But what I see is that sometimes quote unquote liberals are using some of the same tactics to silence their opponents, and it's totally unacceptable. And again, it needs to be publicly called out. And that's why that's why I took the videos, and that's why I'm willing and happy to give interviews on this, because for me, I travel around a lot. I go through many different countries. I've experienced things like this in my political life, not being denied entry, but the sort of targeting and harassment and attempts at intimidation. But what I do worry about is just, normal people, whether Moldovan or American citizens, wherever they're from, being mistreated and not being willing to speak up.
Domnul Braun, pe lângă dumneavoastră știți bine că și niște eurodeputați au fost trimiși acasă de la granița Moldovei. Credeți că Parlamentul European ar trebui să reacționeze într-un fel sau altul?
Well, it definitely should respond in a much stronger way than it has thus far responded. What I mean is, I can guarantee you that if these MEPs were a member of the liberal bloc, you would have statements from the highest level of the EU condemning this. So again, it's hypocrisy. And instead, we've heard relative silence from the European Parliament. That has to change. And again, people need to call out the hypocrisy. There's not one rule for conservatives and one rule for liberals. That's not the way this works. And so, undermining basic human rights and undermining and disrespecting, frankly, members of the European Parliament, it should be treated the same way, regardless of what political grouping it occurs to. And that is not what is happening. It's very clear that there's been a muted silence in response to what happened to the members of the European Parliament.
Domnul Brown, administrația de la Washington cunoaște despre aceste incidente? Cazul dumneavoastră în special.
There are members of the administration that are aware of what has happened. I am hopeful that there will be more discussions on this. And, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I do believe that there will be more, there's more to the story that's going to happen in regard to the decision by the Moldovan authorities.
Mr. Brown, se știe că relațiile Casei Albe cu guvernarea de la Chișinău nu sunt tocmai cele mai bune și de culoare roz. Cum este văzută doamna Maia Sandu de la Washington, drept reprezentanta cui, dacă pot să spun așa?
Well, I will say that I'm not privy to the top level discussions of the administration. President Trump and Secretary Rubio obviously are leaders making key decisions on our international relations. I will say that among those that I know that are supportive of the administration, I think I have a pretty good pulse. Number one, I'll say that given everything that's happening in the world, it's not as though relations with Moldova are top tier importance right now. I just mean that out of everything going on with the war in Ukraine and everything else, there's a lot going on. There are many open ambassador seats. So obviously there's an awareness of Moldova, but I'm not. I don't think that right now that there's a that this is like the top level issue. I will say that people I know see Sandu as again. The idea is that she is very pro-European, very liberal in many ways. And that's why, again, for many of us, it was unexpected that the government would do something like this on one level. But again, I think that the backdrop of having the elections coming, that increasingly there's a fear that she could lose the election, or her parties could lose the election, and therefore that may be why this happened.
Mr. Brown, do you think, dumneavoastră credeți că doamna Maia Sandu, președintele Republicii Moldova, a fost la curent cu incidentul dumneavoastră?
I definitely think that the president of Moldova would have to have been made aware that the security service was going to reject this high level of participants in the Make Europe Great Again conference. These are not decisions typically made by lower level administrators. These are decisions that come from the very top. You don't just deny entry to a country, to a member of the European Parliament. You just don't deny entry to a group of people that are supposed to take part in a conference that has occurred in many different places. And again, is a normal, not extreme in any way, conference that has a particular viewpoint that is conservative and supports the policies of Donald Trump and wants to see those type of policies in Europe. That, given that President Trump is the head of the United States of America, you would think that a country would welcome that rather than attempt to kick the people out. So there is no doubt in my mind that this went straight to the top.
Ok, domnul Brown, dumneavoastră sunteți președinte al Organizației Naționale pentru Căsătorie și al Congresului Mondial al Familiilor. Pledați, bineînțeles, pentru valorile tradiționale, familii, bărbat, femeie. Unele voci să susțin că prin acțiunile dumneavoastră și ale organizațiilor pe care le conduceți, dumneavoastră atentați la drepturile comunităților LGBTQ+. E așa, nu?
No, of course not. We believe in the basic human rights of everyone. But the basic human rights of everyone, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, do not allow the definition of marriage to be altered and changed. Do not allow a fantasy in which men can be women, women can be men. These are all changes and, in fact, attempts to warp human rights. Who really suffer when we, for example, have this the transgender issue, when we push the idea that men and women have no differences and that a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man. Who really suffer is what we're seeing in the United States, where, you know, in women's sports, women are being pushed to the side. They're not having a voice and ability to compete because men are taking over. That has now created a situation where in state after state, women's sports are being protected. And there's a very strong movement in the United States and around the world to support the traditional family. It doesn't mean that you hate anyone. That's just something our opponents say. What it means is you understand that there's something unique and special that a mother offers to a child. There's something unique and special that a father offers to a child. And the state has both a right and a duty to protect the institution of the family. And the family is based on a man and a woman. Some people don't want us to be able to say that anymore, but that is the truth. That is what we will continue to argue. It is not at all hateful. In fact, that is what is in the best interest of children, the best interest of society, and the best interest of the state.
Știți, probabil nu vă place, dar Moldova, domnule Brown, este văzută destul de bine în Uniunea Europeană la capitolul apărării drepturilor comunităților, minorităților sexuale. E și acesta un succes pentru noi, nu credeți?
Well, it depends on what you mean by rights. There is no right to redefine marriage. There is no right to force children to learn about homosexuality when they're in kindergarten. There is no right to redefine what the essence of being a human being is, male or female. There is no right to any of that. So there's a game being played to try and use rights talk to create rights that don't exist. Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights makes quite clear that the family is the natural and fundamental unit of state and society and deserves protection. What it does not do is say that there is any right to redefine marriage as the union of a man and a woman. So, yes, I believe that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. Yes, I believe that and I believe that the majority of those in Moldova would support me, and in the United States, that it's wrong to teach children in the schools values that go against their religion. Of course, I do. But again, it's wrong to say that somehow that is against LGBT rights. We are for the rights of children. We're for the true and fundamental human rights that are laid out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there is no right, I'll repeat, to redefine the nature of marriage and family. That right does not exist. Liberals are attempting to make it up out of thin air. There is no right to push this on our children. There is no right to undermine our religious convictions. In fact, that itself undermines the right of religious freedom. It undermines the right of parents, and it undermines the fundamental human rights of a society.
Okay, let's go back in political. Mr. Brown, do you know who is Eugenia Guțul, Bashkan, of the leader of region of Gagauzia? Do you hear about her?
I only saw today in the
Yes, this was my
online.
question.
I saw today that she was that there was a sentence for 7 years in prison.
Yeah. Do you think something about this?
Well, I'm not well aware of the particular situation. I don't know any of the specifics. I only saw that today, but it does seem extreme, and it does seem taking that a political figure and throwing him in jail 7 years is something that again is is very extreme, very rare, something that we would criticize happening in most of the world. Uh, and given my experience, it makes me think twice about whether this is just. Again, I don't know the specifics of the situation. I'm not in Moldova. I know nothing about the region. All I'm saying is that my own experience makes me have big questions, and it does not look right to have something like that happen. My understanding is that she's a mother of two children. She's a political leader. Even if her opinions, uh, again, were, or even some actions were not what the state wanted, that is, again, frankly, that looks Soviet to me. That looks like something out of the 60s and 70s. That is not something that we do when we disagree with political leaders. And again, the framework and the way that I view the world is deeply impacted by what happened to President Trump and the Russian hoax attack on him and all of the legal attacks that he faced. And frankly, if he wouldn't have won this election, who knows? He may have been put in jail. So we saw this happening in America. I no longer, unfortunately, have a tremendous faith in our legal system in all of these countries because I've seen it used against my friends. I've seen it used against the president himself. And so that makes me deeply, deeply question what just occurred, again, without knowing all of the specifics.
Okay, Mr. Brown, three more questions, please. In Chișinău, la Chișinău, dumneavoastră ați avut întrevederi cu Igor Dodon, Ion Ceban, Vasile Costiuchi, toți sunt președinți de partid, dar ei sunt concurenți electorali. Dumneavoastră îi susțineți toți deodată la aceste alegeri, în the election?
Again, my purpose is broader. I'm not there to support anyone in an election. I'm there to unite a global movement supporting life and family. And I will meet with anyone of any political stripe. And I will not be controlled. I will not be told that you don't have the right to meet with someone just because we don't like them. So, of course, I meet with various political parties. In many countries, I've dealt with opposition leaders and the government, and both sides support the position that we hold on life and family. So again, this is about something much bigger than party. This is about principle, and it's in all of our best interest that people from different political parties hold to the correct principles. And that's why I was quite willing to meet and happy to meet with the mayor and to meet with former President Dodon and to meet with anyone that was interested in meeting while I was there.
Ok, but la alegerile din toamna acestui an, de ce noi să nu votăm pentru Maia Sandu? Ea ne promite nouă că ne duce în Uniunea Europeană.
I'm an American. I'm not going to tell Moldovans how to vote. All I know is what I have experienced. What I have experienced is that the talk of liberalism is a lie. The talk of freedom is a lie. At least in my experience, countries that want to allow for freedom, that want to allow for true democracy, listen to their people, and also listen to the rule of law and don't bar people that they don't like from entering their country, especially when it's about ideas. And so I will just say that I have deep questions about the Sandu administration. I have deep questions. And obviously, I fundamentally have real disagreements over her position and the government's position on the family That to me is quite important. But those two things go together: the attack on the family and the attack on the rights of those of us to speak up for the family and for life. And that's what I have experienced. Uh, I would say that, for me, those that are standing up for family and life, those are the people that I've worked with. That's what I support, and I don't see that coming from the Sandu administration.
Mr. Brown, sincer încă o dată, administrației Trump îi pasă de evenimentele politice de la Chișinău? Moldova contează pentru Statele Unite?
What matters to me, I know it matters to others that have spent a lot of time in Central and Eastern Europe. I've been to Moldova many times. We did a World Congress of Families there, and I know there are others like me that it matters to. And I do think it matters to the Trump administration. I believe that what happens in Moldova is critical to not just Moldova, but to all of the surrounding area. And my primary focus is hoping and believing and praying that Moldova will stand up for family and life. I care about Moldova, and I know a lot of other conservatives care about Moldova. I've spent a lot of time there. I love Moldova. I brought my whole family. I have 9 children and my wife. We all came to Moldova, and we visited the wineries and spent a lot of time in the country. And I have to say, with just beautiful, great people who are quite supportive. We spent time with some of your religious leaders. It's been very important to me, and so I care about it, and I'm trying to get as many others to care about it. I do believe the administration views what occurs in the region as important. It's just so many things are going on right now that I think that this incident that occurred could help to raise the profile. What I care most about in Moldova is that the rights of citizens are protected, the ability for people to speak up and defend their religion and their families is respected, that parents are respected in their rights to raise their children and are not forced to have their children indoctrinated into the LGBT agenda in the schools. I think the majority of Moldovans understand that this is that it's a real threat, that these things are not in the future. There are already attempts to make them happen. So again, I think that there are many people within the administration that care about Moldova. I hope that the profile is raised. I worry about the future, but all I can do is try and get the word out as much as possible on what happened to me and as I said, the importance of Moldova geopolitically.
And the last question, Mr. Brown. Mai veniți vreodată în Moldova după ultima dumneavoastră experiență de aici?
I'll definitely be back to Moldova. Whether the authorities attempt to not allow me in again is another question, but I will be back, and I will obviously be coming alone. I'm not going to have my family put through what I went through, but I'll come back, and I hope for better times where the government would be a government that respects and cherishes the friendship of the United States, that respects and cherishes the friendship of the of members of the European Parliament, that realizes that just because we have disagreements doesn't mean that you should use the power of the state to punish, repress, and marginalize those you disagree with.
Mr. Brown, thank you very much for this interview. Doamnelor și domnilor, atât a fost să fie la ediția de astăzi a emisiunii Interviu. Să trăiți frumos și bine și să vă văd mândri.